Speaking of, in terms of effectiveness, remember Matt Kean. Matt Kean was the Energy and Climate Minister in the former New South Wales government before his factional power meant that he ended up being the Treasurer of New South Wales. Now, he is somebody who claims in his heart of hearts to be all about renewables. We know at one point in time he tried to bring the ghost back, remember, as a special advisor to the New South Wales government, but it didn't happen. And his time when he was the Climate and Energy Minister in New South Wales, at a time...
What we want to see is if there is an opportunity for people to reduce their energy usage, so perhaps not using the dishwasher until you go to bed, that would help.
What a surprise they lost the election. That you are paying through the roof for access to the power grid. But because people like Matt Kean believe that we need to get away from the system that worked to the one that might eventually, fingers crossed, hopefully work, and cost $1 trillion to do so, that, you know, there'll just be little moments where we have to ration power like it's the Second World War, please. Now, as you know, the reality is that the similar warnings have been put forward for the past 2 summers and get ready for the 3rd summer now. Now, the reason we haven't had blackouts for the past 2 summers since his ideological mate, Chris Bowen, yes, I know, the Liberal Party guy who agrees with the Labor Party guy. What a massive surprise. Uni party, but still. They have said that the grid's held up fine for the past couple of years, but the preparation is that yet again, hot summer, we're going to have blackouts. Why? Because the past 2 summers, of course, we've had colder and wetter summers, which means people haven't all been reaching on that 1 day or 2 days or a few days in a week for the air conditioners, but most likely that's going to happen. So in order for New South Wales not to have a scenario where, when everyone reaches for the air conditioner, that the power will just collapse, as you know by now, the New South Wales government, the Labor government, has done what that bloke, Matt Kean, wasn't willing to do when the Liberal government was in power for the best part of, what, a dozen years or so? And that's to actually extend the life of a coal-fired power plant. In fact, one of the oldest in the country. The Eraring Power Plant needs to stay on board because lots of state governments around the country have, of course, blown them up. They've blown up what used to work because, you know, we've got to do something about climate change, the 1% of the world's problem that Australia is. But in the meantime, you need to turn off your appliances while we spend huge amounts of money moving to a new system. Well, thankfully, again, New South Wales government under Chris Minns, who is playing the Labor Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, off a break, showing the reality that we are in a transition. And the transition means we have to have gas or coal-fired power to be able to prop up the system until not only there's enough renewable energy built, but enough renewable storage built. And as you know, people will now be penalised under some power companies, particularly in New South Wales, if they have solar panels but they don't have a battery worth quite a few $1,000s in their garage to store the power. So in the meantime, the best part of, what, $500 million, otherwise known as a voice referendum, is how much it will cost to keep the coal-fired power station going, not for another 20 years, by the way, just till 27.
The New South Wales Government has secured an agreement with Origin Energy to operate the Eraring Power Station until August 2027. This temporary and targeted agreement will ensure the lights stay on while we manage an orderly exit from coal-fired power.
Now, of course, there is another way we could get baseload power, and that would be nuclear power. Just like many other G20 or G8 nations, many countries across Europe are able to pretend that they can be supported by renewable power because what actually is pumping things is none other than nuclear power. Now, as you've heard this week, the CSIRO has come out and said, too expensive, it'll take too long, i.e. there's a cost of transition. Well, that, of course, has been my argument for, what, 15 years. That those who believe in a renewable future always ignore the cost of transition to that future. And that will be paid for by one of two things, the government or customers. And interestingly, the cost of transition argument is the exact one being used by the left to say why nuclear power is not the option. In fact, on Crikey today, Dutton's Nuclear would spike electricity prices when and if it was able to start in the 2040s. Well, breaking news to them and anyone else who is of the belief that the reason we can't go the nuke route is because the cost of transition. We have been involved in a transition of our power grid at the moment, and it has cost As the CSIRO told us once, $1 trillion. Now they've magically halved it to $500 billion, where several green groups will tell you that, of course, the building of renewables ends up costing hundreds of billions of dollars. It takes up way more space. We all know that the life cycle of the solar panels is not great. The solar panels come from slave labour in China, but shh, don't tell anyone. So I like the argument is don't go what Dutton wants to do because it'll end up with higher electricity prices because you have to pay to build it. My exact argument about the cost of transition, which has always been the central issue, not about whether Australia needed to change, but if somebody had to be honest about what that change would be. Isn't it amazing that when the change is the one they don't want, suddenly it costs a lot of money? But as you know, right now, as anyone who's paid a power bill any time in the past, 10 years, knows that one of the reasons they keep going uppity up, up, up is because the system that has worked is being replaced by the one that, fingers crossed, will work into the future. But don't worry, when it's all over, it'll be cheaper. Sure.